Are you considering cord blood banking after your baby's delivered? I'll talk about the latest information today, coming up. Hey everyone, Dr. Wes Davis back with you again today. I make weekly YouTube videos giving you the best evidence-based information to help you have the best possible outcome for you and your baby. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing. A patient recently asked me about whether or not I thought it was a good idea to do cord blood banking after her baby's born. And so I thought that I would make a video about this because it's a pretty common question, and the answer is not as simple as you might think. If you're expecting a baby, if you've registered for a baby registry anywhere, then no doubt you've gotten some pretty serious amounts of advertising through the mail and in your emails and probably web mail targeting you and to advertise to you this service that if only you would do. The ads are all about all the terrible diseases that could be cured by using cord blood banking. And it's really not quite that simple. The answer is much more nuanced, and I want to get into it today. So I'm going to talk to you about the two different types of cord blood banking, that's public and private, and also some of the potential uses that are out there. First, let's have a quick discussion about what exactly is cord blood banking. So once a baby's born, the cord is clamped and cut after a small period of time, and there is still blood inside that cord from the placenta, and this is the blood we're talking about that can be drawn into a collection kit and sent to a lab for storage. At that point, the placenta is still attached inside the uterus, and the blood that we're talking about is the blood that was circulating inside the baby. Now, it's important to know that if you do delayed cord clamping, which I definitely recommend, it is less likely to be successful that you will have a good enough size sample to store for future use. So inside this bag of blood that's now been collected are fetal red blood cells and white blood cells and platelets and antibodies and all kinds of other things. But one other element that's in there are these hematopoietic stem cells. And basically they're cells that have the potential to make any blood cell out there. So very similar to cells that are in your bone marrow. So the idea is that if there's ever a medical condition that could be treated by a bone marrow transplant, then if you just so happen to have some stem cells saved from your cord blood banking, then those could be used. And that's actually easier than trying to find a bone marrow donor match, especially in minority groups. This has led to the rising popularity of considering storing fetal cord blood for future use. So like I was saying, there's two types of cord banks out there, public and private. Private banks are typically for-profit businesses. The parents are responsible for all the fees associated with the collection, processing, and storage of their unit of fetal blood. The cost can be over $1,000 just for the initial step of actually collecting and processing the unit. And then there's also a yearly fee for continued storage. I just did a quick Google search and found one company advertising $4,000 all in, lifetime coverage. So you can see you can get into some pretty big amounts of money pretty quick. Now, the alternatively public banks are exactly what they sound like. It's not much different than the Red Cross, where you just donate a unit of blood and that is stored for use by anyone in the public. And the difference there is, of course, the cost is deferred to the patient who actually uses it, typically through their insurance. So it doesn't cost the parents anything to donate to a cord bank. Whereas if you're using a private banking, it could be quite expensive. So the question really is, who could benefit from your baby's cord blood unit? And the unfortunate answer is typically not your baby. So most of the things that you would use this blood for, things like leukemia, sickle cell trait, or other hemoglobinopathies, typically you need blood from a person that doesn't have that disease. So if you think about it, if you save blood from a person who is genetically predisposed to someday developing leukemia, and you put back those same stem cells, they're probably just going to get leukemia again. So typically you don't use a unit of a person's own blood to try to replace their bone marrow after they've been treated for leukemia, as they'd be prone for recurrence. This is true for something like sickle cell disease as well. The cells that made the person have sickle cell in the first place are still there in the stem cells, so they're no better off. So the much more likely use for a privately stored unit of cord blood is in a sibling. And there are some specific situations where it might make sense for you to pay the money to save that unit of blood. So let's say you already have a child that's affected with sickle cell disease. Sickle cell anemia is an autosomal recessive trait, which means that both mom and dad would have to provide the gene that codes for the sickle cell gene to the baby in order for the baby to develop the disease. Now, if one parent donates the gene, that you'd have what's called sickle cell trait, but that child's typically not affected. So there's a 25% chance that a family with one child affected with sickle cell disease would have another child affected, and a 50% chance that they would have the trait. If you have a child affected with sickle cell disease, then with a subsequent baby, you could save that blood, and in the hopes that they don't have sickle cell disease, then those stem cells could be used to treat your first child and potentially offer a cure. So in that case, it makes perfect sense. Same concept if you had a child who was affected with leukemia and another healthy child. If you'd saved the cord blood from the healthy child, that could be used in your child who turned out to have leukemia. So leukemias are fairly rare, so I wouldn't recommend saving blood just in case one of your kids happens to have that. But if you have a child that's already been affected, it makes perfect sense. So those are probably the two most common situations where I'd recommend actually spending the money to do private cord blood banking. Otherwise, I really don't recommend it. There are estimates from various studies that have estimated the chances that you would actually use a unit of cord blood for your own child at about 1 in 2,000 to 1 in 20,000. So not very likely, and it's a lot of money to spend for a small chance. Now, ultimately, it's free country. Do what you want to with your money, but it's not a very likely thing that you're going to actually wind up using it for your own child. However, if in your area there is a public cord blood bank, I definitely recommend donating to that. We had one of those back in North Carolina. Unfortunately, here in Utah, there is no public cord bank. There are several for-profit companies that are advertising very heavily to our patients. I don't recommend using those unless you're in one of the specific situations that I've already discussed. I hope you found this information helpful. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.